everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presented by the Servant Leadership Institute in Carlsbad, California. I'm Carol Malinsky, Manager of Products and Services at SLI, and I'll be hosting today's conversation. Our founder and CEO, Art Barter, is with us this morning to talk about a very necessary servant leadership behavior of demonstrate courage. SLI is a leadership development organization that is dedicated to teaching the implementation of servant leadership. We believe servant leadership is to inspire and equip the people we influence. Servant leadership takes that traditional power model of leadership and turns it upside down. In order to benefit from today's discussion, we'll include an opportunity for you to ask questions toward the end of our time today. And we want to include a Q&A this morning with those of you who attended SLC 16 here in San Diego, our servant leadership conference that was held earlier in March. Here's how you can submit your questions on the conference or on this morning's behavior discussion. As you see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is an area to type in questions. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during the webinar. We'll get to as many questions as possible during the Q&A segment at the end of the session. The Institute teaches that to transform and sustain a servant-led culture, there are 9 behaviors that are key. At our last webinar, we discussed the behavior of add value to others. This session, we're going to have a conversation around demonstrate courage. Art, can we start by describing or defining the behavior of demonstrate courage?
Absolutely. Good morning, Carol. Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending your time with us today. And for those out there that attended the conference, thank you as well. It was a great time. So demonstrate courage. What we talk about when we talk about courage is accountability. That's a word in leadership. And it's basically an obligation or a willingness to accept responsibility and or to account for our actions and behaviors as leaders. And this is one of the most important things we can do, is to have the courage to do what we say we're going to do. And that we translate into, let's behave our talk. Now, it's just not walk our talk, let's behave it. So to have the courage to face challenges in our day that we all face, courage to help others with and through the tough conversations that leaders face every day, that we have to have, courage to do what is needed to be done to help others deal with what we call the unfolding of events in their life. It affects everyone when events happen in their life. And of course, it's just all tied within the values. We have to have courage within the values that we believe in. We can't have that courage go past those boundaries, or it comes back to haunt us as leaders. So, courage to serve first is what we talk about first. And the most challenging thing I think servant leaders face is helping others change their behavior, their transformation. And it's not just for the moment of time, it's not for the day of the week or in that week, it's to change your behavior on an ongoing basis and be consistent. And that's really what courage is all about. Courage to do something different in accordance with the values you believe in and what's best for the organizations, and to have courage to have those courageous conversations, which we'll talk a little bit later.
Yeah. So I can truly understand through listening to you, Art, the importance of this behavior. But can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe.
Sure.
More of your insights.
Yeah. For me, Carol, it's there are things that I love to do.
Yeah.
Every day, I would love to go. There are things that I don't like to do.
Yep.
And if I had the choice every day to do what I like to do, I'm going to pick what I like to do. That may not be the best thing for your organization or for your team that day. And leaders have to show up and say, what is the best thing for me to do for my team today? And if that's a conversation you need to have that you've been putting off, that's what that's all about. And this applies to everyone in leadership. The fun side of leadership is fun. The difficult side of leadership requires courage for us to get through it and help others get through it. And having those difficult conversations with someone who's not living your values in the company, who may not be performing at the level required, you really need to listen to understand what's going on with someone. And that takes courage sometimes for us leaders to keep our mouths closed and our ears open.
Yeah, well, a lot of times I think, the easy road is to let it continue. I think we've all experienced situations in our work life where there's an individual that's coasting, right? But management continues to let that exist,
right?
Because they don't want to deal with it.
And it is easy. It's easier for us to go, well, you know what? I'll deal with that in tomorrow's schedule, or I really have a tough week this week. I'll deal with it next week. And really, what we're saying is we've got our fingers crossed under the table, hoping that situation goes away.
Yeah, and before you know it, it's 5 years down the road, right?
Yep.
Or you transfer that person to somebody else and let them deal with it.
And let them deal with it. That's the great corporate world we live in, is let's transfer it to somebody else and let somebody else deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So there are different aspects of this behavior of demonstrate courage that you've talked about, Art, and I'd like to get your comments on some of these. For example, we teach that to demonstrate courage, it's important to challenge non-useful beliefs. Can you comment on that?
Sure. If you look at the screen, and I love this image, professional golfer. We just got done with the LPGA tour here in town, and how can you go into that game saying I'm a terrible putter? I'll never be good enough to play on tour, or there's no way I can become a supervisor in my company. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the degree. I don't have this. And we can come up with all kinds of excuses that brings to it. And those non-useful beliefs keeps us from doing things. And what we try and help leaders understand is those non-value beliefs, people bring them to your organization with the experience they've had in life. Right. And so those non-value beliefs could come from a previous experience in your company, or before that person came to work for your company. And you have to understand that as a leader, because the reaction you're going to get from someone who, in a previous company, their value was if somebody challenged anybody and wanted to do something different or improve it, they were fired, or they moved to another department. Yeah. Or if I was asked to come to talk to the CEO about values, this is my favorite one. People come to my office, the box is packed, they're ready to go. They're going to go to HR next and they're going to get fired. No, that's not how we do business here. And we all have those non-value beliefs, but what do you believe about yourself? What do you believe you can do and what you can't do? And when you believe you can't do something, you can't do it. And you're never going to get past that block. And so part of our job as leaders is to have that challenging discussion with folks. What's keeping you from going to the next step? Where do you want to go? How do we help you get to that point where you want to go? Yeah.
I know in experiencing servant leadership training through Datron, one of the most enlightening things for me was this subject. And when I learned that I could start challenging myself about why I was thinking certain ways, right? Exactly. Is this a useful thought or is it not a useful thought?
Right.
And it became that simple for me and really helped me to understand this, the idea of holding yourself back.
If you think about trust and those people that extend trust to people they meet, they've had great experiences with trust. People who don't want to trust anyone else, they want to hold it back. Right. You have to earn my trust. Those are people that they've had difficult relationships in their past with trust, and they bring that to the table. And it doesn't make them a bad person. They're all great people. Help them get through that process to understand that they can really believe in themselves, like you said. Yeah. Help people believe in themselves and what they can do, and find out what their passions are and help them go work in those passions. Yeah.
So the next one is, what does it mean to confront reality as we demonstrate courage?
Well, this one's pretty big in today's environment. Do we have the courage to talk about what is really going on in our organization, in your department? In the quality world, we used to talk about the root cause. What's the root cause of the problem? And, I love to talk about, when was the last time you left a meeting with the feeling of the real problem didn't get discussed? or you're sitting around a table waiting for someone to bring up the real problem that you have. Are you willing to confront reality and say, first we're going to start about ourselves, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in your organization, are you really willing to sit down and say, this part of the organization is broken and needs to be improved? Or, hey, I need to invest some processes here to help people get better at what they're doing. Maybe we're not providing enough lab equipment for engineers. And we're asking them to work out of their office space. We faced that many, many years ago where I toured our engineering facility and I said, wow, we're doing lab work inside cubicles.
Yeah.
We're not giving them what they need to have. And so are you able to do that and confront reality? What's really going on in your organization? And that requires leaders, especially at the top, to sit back and listen to those that are actually doing the work, because they know best of what's going on in your organization. Listen to them and listen to what's going on and grab onto that reality that's out there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to remind everybody that you can enter your questions at any time during the webinar, so feel free to do that. Which brings us to now the next aspect, which is delivering results. What does that look like for a servant leader, and what does it have to do with demonstrating courage?
Well, you know, in today's environment, we've got a lot of examples of companies that just focus on getting results. There are a lot of companies I could make a list of that are no longer in existence today because they focused on the short-term results. They didn't focus on long-term. All it meant was, what are you going to do for me in the next 90 days or 180 days? And, you know, what's my share value going to be? Yeah. And so are you willing to focus on how you get those results rather than the results themselves? That's really what we like to say. And in, you know, my book I wrote, Farmer Abel, he likes to talk about how you grow the harvest is more important than the harvest itself. Mm-hmm. And leaders need to think the same way. We need to focus on the process of getting those results, not just on getting those results. Now, if you think about a leader who makes a statement, I will do anything or everything I need to do to get results. Think about what that leader just communicated to his organization. There's no comment about values.
Right.
There's no comment about how we're going to get there. He just made a statement that I'm willing to do anything and everything it takes to get results. That's the most dangerous leader out there, because the message he's sending to his organization is, I don't care what it takes. All I want is results. Those organizations don't last. Jim Collins in Good and Great did a great study. He looked at organizations over a 15-year period, not 5 years, not 1 year, 15 years, and he wanted to see where the consistent growth was. Those companies that lasted that 15-year period were all CEOs that were very quiet and humble and focused on how you got the results, not just the results themselves. We still have to get results as leaders, so when we transform our culture, we can't put results on hold. Our organizations won't survive.
Right.
So you have to transform your culture and get results at the same time. And that's an additional challenge that leaders take on. But the challenge is well worth the results, because you help the organization perform better, you help people perform better, but more importantly, you help people create that success and the feeling that they're doing something positive.
Yeah,
they get to feel good about themselves,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I was just thinking about that with respect to, you know, when you're giving a message about getting results and being able to tie that into values for people. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, their job takes on a different form.
It
right?
does.
Because it's not just, oh, I did this good thing. It's, I did this good thing and I feel really good about myself because I did it the right way. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't cheat anybody. I didn't run over anybody.
Right.
I maintained my values.
Exactly. And it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good when you do things the right way. And we all know when we're taking those shortcuts. We all know that. But it's one of the most rewarding things that an organization can have is when you do focus on that process, on how you get the results, and you get the results greater than what you thought you'd get. Mm-hmm. That's when it really gets exciting.
Yeah, that's Cool. Art, I'd love to have your comments about 3 other aspects of demonstrating courage that, in my mind, really go together. They are the actions of facing our shortcomings, being transparent, and asking for help.
Well, this all focuses on that person in the mirror that we look at every day. First thing, what kind of relationship do you have with that person in the mirror? Do you have the courage to really look at your heart and your behaviors and change what you're doing? Are you really serious about that? And do you have the courage to go, you know what, I did something yesterday that I shouldn't have done. I need to go make it right. And then take the courage to take those actions that day and make it right. It's very, very difficult to do. This requires you to listen to other people and what they have to say about you. So go the ones that you love the most. Those are the ones that will tell you where you need to improve and what your shortcomings are. Listen to those in your organization that you trust. Listen to what they have to say. Make sure they feel comfortable that I want to know how you really feel about this about me as a leader. Ask them to give you feedback every day in everything you do. Ask them, how did I do here? And not to pat yourself on the back, but to learn from your mistakes and learn from your behaviors to move forward.
Yeah. I really feel like one of the biggest impacts you can make as a leader is when people start seeing you actually own up to things and go in and apologize if you've had some kind of, you've treated somebody in a way that you shouldn't have, or possibly offended them in some way, to actually go in and say, I'm so sorry, I should not have done that.
Right.
I tell you, that'll build your credibility in such an amazing way. And I know you've experienced that.
You do. You have to admit your mistakes. Or as a leader, in our radio business, when we don't meet results, it starts with me. I take that on my shoulders.
Yeah.
I don't go out and look for, who to blame for this. It starts with me as a leader. I have to take ownership of, hey, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. When you make the mistake, are you really willing to admit to those who follow you that you made a mistake in an open forum, in a meeting? Not just in one-on-one conversations. It's easy for me to admit a mistake to you.
Yeah.
Can I admit a mistake to my entire leadership team and say, hey, I messed up, and this is what I'm going to learn from it, and this is how I'm going to get better in the future? And then ask this other question is, if I do this again, would someone in this team please tell me that I'm doing it? Right?
Yeah.
One of my, what I look at in leaders when I'm in a meeting is how many leaders are looking at the floor or looking at the table, and where I've lost the engagement of the people around the table. And you can look at nonverbal signs that really help you. But it's all about what you're doing, all right? And this will help you become a better leader. Become a better leader because you're asking for feedback from those that you care most about.
Yeah, great. The last aspect of demonstrating courage is one that I know you feel really strongly about, and that is the courage to have the difficult conversation. Can you give our listeners some tips on having that difficult conversation, particularly with someone that we're leading?
Sure. I'm going to go back to your previous question for just a second because I want to talk about mentoring.
Okay.
That's part of helping you get better. You need outside mentors as well as inside people. And for me today, I have 4 mentors in my life that are outside my company. And I do that because they give me a different perspective on things that are going on in the company. They all give me a different perspective in life of what I need to look at. And that, in conjunction with the discussion that happens inside, that's what really helps me get better as a leader. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Art. So basically, there's 6, we call them 6 steps.
Yep.
And so can you take us through that?
These are the 6 steps that I always follow when I have to have a courageous conversation, as we call them. The first is I will take these 6 questions and I will go through them myself before I have the meeting with the individual. All right, I will walk through this conversation in my head first by myself. Here's the issue. I will go through these 6 items and talk to myself about what I'm going to talk about each one.
Okay.
But the first one I do is I clarify the relationship you desire to have. Hey, Carol, I want to have a great relationship with you.
Right.
All right. Discuss the unacceptable behavior. Carol, I noticed yesterday that you didn't quite live up to one of our values, and I want to talk to you about that. You know, it's really important to the company that you exhibit the values. You're in a leadership position. It's really important you exhibit the values of the company, and I want to talk about that with you today. And then discuss the company values, the mission and purpose. And then I want to, you know, listen to what you have to say about that, because normally I'll have a specific situation, right? So we'll enter into a conversation. I give some examples of what the behavior was, and we talk about what the unacceptable behavior was. And then we explain the consequences. So, hey, Carol, you know, this value that you violated yesterday, it's really important to us that we work on this. If we continue to see an issue here, I may have to do a formal write-up. I may have to put you on notice, and that would be the next step. If I've already had those 2 steps with you as an individual, then we got to talk about the big trouble step, right? Yeah, exactly. So then we got to talk about, okay, what's the next step? Right. Because we can't have, you know, management in violation of our values. But here's the most important thing you can do at the end of these conversations. The very most important thing you do is make sure that you tell the person, Carol, you do a great job in this area. You do a great job over here. You really helped me in the book publications over here. You helped me with the Fox's publication here. You have done some great work, and I want to restore the relationship to what it once was. You know, we had a great relationship. We got off track, but now I want to get that relationship back on track. And if we enter into those difficult conversations with the right mindset of, Carol, I want to restore the relationship to what we once had. Let's go back to having fun. That now takes away from, I'm not here to prove you right or me wrong. Right. We're having a conversation of what's important to the company and what's important to our values and how we can get better together with that. And gosh, let's go back to having fun again. All right, let's not talk about this anymore.
Certainly, it leaves it on such a more positive note.
It does, and I will tell everybody listening today, when I've used these 6 steps, I always have a great conversation. When I get into a rush and I skip some of these steps and I don't take it all 6, that's when I have a challenging situation with the conversation. I didn't get the reaction I thought because I didn't take time to go through everything and end the conversation on a positive note. This is some of the most difficult things leaders have, is to sit down and have these challenging conversations with people. We're talking about people's performance. We're talking about the challenges they have in their behaviors. And most of the time it's something negative. Most of the time you don't have a challenging conversation with something positive. It's always on a negative side. And we're always talking about changing behavior. And so if you can enter into that discussion with the right mindset, that's great. Now, here's the warning I would give every leader that's listening today. If you're emotional about the situation, go walk around the building. We've already had this conversation. If you can't get the emotions out of you that day, then defer the conversation until tomorrow or the next day. Don't go into difficult conversations with emotions. You'll always get off track, and by that evening or the next day you go, man, Art, why did I do that? And now I've got to go restart the conversation, which now is going to make it a little more tougher. So if I get excited with you on one day and kind of give you a hard time and chew on you a little bit, and I go home and go, man, she's worth a lot more than that. She didn't deserve to get that. I need to go back the next day and say, can we have a conversation? And first, I want to apologize for what I did. You didn't deserve that. You bring so much more to the company. You don't deserve that conversation. That takes courage on the part of a leader to say, I messed up, and I'm sorry I messed up, and help me not do that again. And so study the 6 steps, go through them with the challenging conversations, and you will have a positive conversation at the end. Always, always, always end on a positive note. All right. Yep.
Thank you. And that kind of leads to this last question I want to talk about, I want to ask you. Before we get to listener questions, I wanted to ask you about constructive feedback. You have a story of yours about a colleague who was brave enough, courageous enough to give you some constructive feedback. Can you share that story with us? I love this story.
Yes, Yetta up in Canada. She and I belong to a circle group of senior executives this past year. And during the year, we get matched up with individuals, and then we have a monthly phone call. And so we got calling, we entered the phone call, and we started talking about our challenges. And I was answering questions she had about our leadership team. What do you do in SLI? What do you do in the radio business? And I was at the point where I was saying, well, you know, in our organization, our leaders try to do this. In our offsite meetings, we try to do this. When I sit down with a person, I try to do this. And about halfway through the conversation, she says, Art, could I mentor you for a moment? And this is important. She asked my permission to mentor me.
Yeah.
And I had the courage to say yes. I said, yeah, I would love to have you mentor me. And she said, I want to mentor you on you using the word try and what leaders portray when they use the word try. And that ended into a conversation in her organization where they don't allow anyone to use the word try. And they have a whole set of words that they don't allow their leadership team to use. And I hung up from that phone and I said, you know what, I'm going to go study the word try. And I spent a week or so studying what the word try means. Mm-hmm. Looked up in the dictionary, Wikipedia, I went everywhere. And I ended up writing an article on when leaders use the word try. Yeah. And it basically, we're communicating to the organization that we're really not committed to what we're doing. We're just going to try it and see if it works. And so we're going to keep our fingers crossed and we're going to go down this path. And then, you know, if it doesn't work in 6 months, we'll go try something else. She had the courage first to ask my permission. And I learned from that because that's a really important part. Carol, can I mentor you for a moment? Can I help you understand something? Sure. Or can I ask you some questions? 99% of the time, you're going to say yes. Yeah. Right? If you say no, what Yetta taught me was, hey, Carol, that's great. I'll catch you tomorrow sometime. And if they're not ready to be mentored, pass on to that. Uh-huh. But she spent the time with me, first asking me questions, asking permission, and then giving me her perspective on what I was saying about my leadership team, on what we tried to do. And I remember that conversation to this day. I was just on a conference call with the entire team last week. It was our last call. We spent an hour and a half on the phone every month. And I thanked Yetta for that. That was one of the highlights of my year last year with that group. Oh, that's great. Was that mentoring session I had with her on the phone one day for an hour. And yeah, it was special. And I will never forget the word try. Yeah, well, I think you've changed a lot of our perspectives about the word try. So at this point, let's go ahead and take some questions from our listeners. If you were an attendee at SLC 16 San Diego, we'd love to have your conference questions as well as the questions from everybody based on our conversation today. Let's see here. This question is, we have a person who's asked if she can get a copy of the slides. A recorded copy of today's entire webinar will be posted on SLI's website by tomorrow afternoon, and this is something we do on a regular basis. So you can also see there our past webinars if you missed any of the behaviors that we've gone through. Next question is, can you walk me through a way to talk about the real problems in an environment that people fear speaking up? Tough question. Well, there's that F word, the fear word. Mm-hmm. Organizations that have created a fear-type environment, is you're going to have challenges until you take care of the fear. You don't have to take care of it 100%. You just have to show that you can speak up, and nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to come back to work tomorrow. You'll be here next week, and you'll be able to talk about challenges as well. So that's the part. You've got to help take that fear away, and sometimes that means I just have to have a one-on-one conversation. Mm-hmm. Carol, I've noticed that you're a little hesitant in talking, in the conference room. What's holding you back? And this is a conversation you want to have outside the room.
Right.
What's holding you back? Can you tell me what's on your mind? I kind of sense that there's something there that we should be talking about. And then it's important to not have a negative reaction to that. And once you do that a couple times, you're going to gain some trust with someone. Then you do it with someone else, and you do it with someone else, and you start working away around to let people see that you can be trusted as someone who you can talk to and talk about challenges, and the next day you're still going to have a job. Right? Yeah. And so you've got to work on that fear in the organizations, and you do it one conversation at a time. You're not going to go up and announce in an all-hands meeting or a departmental meeting. Tomorrow, when you come here, fear is going to be gone. No more fear in this organization. It's not going to happen. You have to earn that fear, and you have to earn it with your behavior. And that's the best way to do it, is do it one-on-one, especially those folks in the conference room that have their eyes down looking at the table. Mm-hmm. Ask them afterwards, that afternoon, the next day, hey, I thought there was something you wanted to say. Tell me what's going on. Yeah, I want to understand what's going on here so I can help the team fix it.
So it sounds like you don't necessarily recommend, putting those people on the spot. In other words, within the session, the person looking at their desk or whatever, you would not recommend calling them out in that.
No. You do that one-on-one in a private session to create that safety environment. Yeah. If you call them out of the meeting, they're going to feel like they're being put on the spot. Right. Exactly what you said. The fear is not going to go away. And sometimes as a leader, sometimes the best you can do is during the meeting till tomorrow, and let people know, you know what, I'm not getting the conversation that I hope to get. Let's reconvene this tomorrow or the day after. We'll reschedule this because I really want to have this an open conversation. I really want to have everybody participate. And you may want to make a smaller group and get the greatest people to get in a smaller group, and then they can show in a larger group that, hey, I've done this and I didn't go away. I didn't get written up. I didn't get put off in the corner. Yeah. Nothing happened to me.
That was the other thing I was going to ask you about was, if you do have courageous people within the group, would you enlist them to kind of help you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would enlist them. If you have a great relationship with someone, like if you and I, we've been working for years, I would ask you to help me go into a group and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me create this environment for me? And that can be a positive thing, but then you have to work on those individual conversations, right, to create.
Oh yeah, because I don't think it's going to. I totally agree with you that it's not going to change until people see with their own eyes that nobody's going to get jumped on if they offer up an idea that's maybe radical. I don't even want to use the word radical, but just an idea that's different. Next question. How does a CEO keep the right balance of short-term results and long-term results? What have you found useful for including foresight about the long-term impact in your daily decisions? Whoa, that's a good question.
That's a great question, and it's full of questions. I think for me as a CEO, I want to be thinking strategically all the time. There's going to be a lot of times where I'm task-driven, and I have to be task-driven for those short-term results. Mm-hmm. But those decisions I make, I always want to have in the back of my head be thinking about what's the long-term result of this? What am I going to put off to get this short-term result? Does it help the company? Does it hurt the company? Mm-hmm. How do I explain that to, if you have investors or shareholders or your board or your CEO, how do you explain that to someone? And there is a balance there because it is, we're so results driven. But I would encourage you, focus on how you get those results because the results will come. And then also think about what the long-term impact is. So 12 months out, what's important for us to, where is important for us to be 12 months out, 24 months out? How do you think about that when you're talking about a 90-day decision? And what we do in our company, we set goals for the year Here's our 5 or 6 things we want to accomplish. But within that, we have 90-day goals that we set. Here's what we want to work on the next 90 days. But we all want it to fall under, these are our 5 or 6 things that we want to accomplish this year. So we're always looking at that along with the short-term 90 days. And it takes a little bit of practice, and sometimes for us, we just take a whiteboard and we start putting stickies up. Write something on there strategic and stick it under the strategic side and keep it in front of you. And that way your team goes, yeah, we are thinking strategically, because here's all the stickies on the strategic side. Here's all the stickies on the task side. And you know what? People get to participate in that. And you get to keep it in front of you, and it's not in your task book. It's not in your computer. It's not. You actually have it on a board where your senior team or your team can participate in that process. So,
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that planning process, which I think is really, really effective, the cascading aspect of that from, you know, the manager or from the director down to individual contributors?
Yeah, people love to know where the company's going. Yeah. Everybody in the organization loves to know where we're going. People love to know who's our customers. We're an international radio business, and our other business is a radio business. They love to hear stories about what our radios did to help people in that country. And that creates a long-term relationship with the country, right? That's going to service us long-term,
right?
Not just for the moment. And so, everyone in the organization loves to talk strategically. You have to be careful there, though. We all have to stay task-driven, and we have to get results.
Right.
So let's not lose sight of that. So there is a balance there, and I like to go. Senior team is usually the strategic group that you need to have. The management director level, those are usually the tactical guys that need to go get things done. And you have to figure out what that looks like in your own organization. Where does that split occur? And then start operating within that split. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever witnessed a scenario where a team within the bigger team was able to create a culture of servant leadership despite what's going on with the bigger team?
Oh, great question. And my answer is absolutely.
And you got a great answer.
This is how most of the change occurs in organizations today. Yeah. When a corporate group comes out and dictates this is who we're going to be, if they don't follow it with a lot of ownership within the management team and ownership throughout the organization, it's not going to go anywhere. If you really want to create a long-lasting change with the organization, you give the ownership of that change into the team that can make the change on a daily basis, and transfer that ownership. And we've helped clients start within a division, and large corporation, you start within a division. Kindred Healthcare started in a group down in Texas. They're now training servant leadership in 48 states, but they started within that group within Texas. Right. They didn't start at the corporate level. Absolutely, that happens all the time. Don't think that's not worth the effort, because it is. Yeah.
So just do this stuff, as Cheryl Batchelder said,
yeah,
and watch what happens. A comment: when the leader admits his or her mistakes, those who report to the leader also feel free to admit their mistakes, and honesty that flows from it is highly productive. I've lived through this. Glad you're discussing this aspect of leadership.
It does. Whatever the leader does on a daily basis and shows and behaves will be followed to the rest of the organization. Absolutely true. I'm thrilled to hear that's worked for you.
Great. Next question. What do you do when someone comes to you in confidence about a situation that has upset the employee? They say they don't do anything, but you know you should do something for the good of the company, aka to do something will break their trust.
So I'm going to talk about a couple things here, because we live in an environment that's pretty interesting. If it has anything to do with workplace violence, if it has anything to do with bullying, if it has anything to do with something that from a legal perspective can get the company in trouble, you have to have a conversation with someone. You have to tell that individual, listen, Carol, I appreciate what you just told me, but here's my concern, and here's where I think it's going to fall, but here's where I need to go talk to. I need to do that, or I need to encourage you to go talk to that person. Can I set that meeting up for you?
Yeah.
All right, because that may be a lot easier conversation for you to have with someone else than it is to have with me. So trust is very important, but you also have to make sure. I always like the phrase that I learned a couple years ago is anger is one letter away from danger.
Mm-hmm.
And in workplace violence and bullying today, they teach that anger against objects like staplers, coffee cups, computers, that is one step away from workplace violence. Mm-hmm. And we live in a different environment today where we've got to be sensitive about what's going on. You got to be careful with that. Now, if it's a relationship thing, you come to me and say, hey, you're having challenges with Robin. Mm-hmm. I can help facilitate that, or I can give you ideas on how to work with that. Right. I have had experience where I've mentored someone on our manufacturing floor who was having a challenge with their lead, and I helped them deal with that. And mm-hmm. basically was go out and perform. Go do more than what they're asking you to do. Yeah. And that solves a lot of the relationship issues. So it all depends on what the issue is. Yeah. I hope that helped.
Great. This will be our last question. Do you have any tips for bringing it to your CEO's attention that the culture of servant leadership seems to be lost within the company's middle management team? Most employees in a non-managerial or supervisory position seem to embrace the culture, but supervisors, managers, and directors seem to really focus in on their numbers looking good.
This is a continuing challenge with culture, and any culture. But when we're talking about servant leadership culture, you've got to get people to look at the process of results and not focus on just the results themselves. You need to raise the flag with someone you trust in the organization. If the senior leadership team is very serious about the culture of servant leadership, they need to know about it. They need to hear it. And in situations where I know CEOs in organizations where something's been going on in the organizations for 6 months, and they said, I didn't hear about it. And when I asked them about it, he says, you know, someone on the floor just assumed that I knew, and they just assumed I wasn't doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, don't assume that your CEO knows. Don't make that assumption. Make sure you communicate and let him know what's going on. And if he's a good person in a servant-led organization, mm-hmm. he'll deal with that in a servant leadership way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got to deal within the values of the company. Yeah. But talk to people. Talk to someone. Let them know. Send them an email. But here's a recommendation. Don't send them an anonymous email. Okay? Just for everybody that's listening, I don't respond to anonymous emails.
Right.
All right? If I don't know who it came from, then I can't have the conversation with the person. Mm-hmm. Make sure you raise the flag. Don't hesitate on that, because culture in organizations is important to CEOs. All of the ones that I know, their culture is very, very important, and they want to know if they're doing things right, not doing things right. They want to know. They want that feedback. So find someone you trust in the organization and let them know.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Those were great questions. Be on the lookout for a date and time when we'll discuss our next behavior, which is to increase your influence. And we invite you to stay connected to us through social media. We'd love you to join our conversations. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel now, so you'll be able to view our video content, which is growing. And we all know how fast time goes, so we want to give you a heads up. Save the date for SLC 17 San Diego. The dates are March 13th and 14th at the Marriott Marquis San Diego Marina. Beautiful facility. You're not going to want to miss this premier event in the servant leadership community. Art, do you have any thoughts you'd like to leave with us as we close today's webinar?
Yeah, you know, courage can take a lot of different forms, and we saw in the opening slide. You know, we have to think bigger than we are, and we have to be able to have the courage to take that step forward and step past our abilities, step past our beliefs. And I would encourage everyone, have the courage to have that conversation, have the courage to change that behavior, have the courage to extend trust, have the courage to say hi to someone in the hallway. Say, hey, Carol, how you doing today? And when they say, oh, man, I'm struggling, don't say, oh, hey, that's good, and keep going. Have the courage to do some of these things. and you'll be surprised at the reactions you're going to get. And I wish everyone luck in working on their servant leadership behaviors.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody, for attending today's session. As we sign off, we always like to challenge you with a question. As a leader, when you leave the room, what's the wake you leave behind you? Is it one that demonstrates courage? Are you willing to face the tough decisions and follow through on them? Thanks again, and we hope you'll join us for our next webinar on increasing your influence.